Our next speaker, Rich Briner, The Sting of the Blade. The Sting of the Blade, Rich Briner.
Hey. As the 10th speaker on this program, I feel a little bit like Zsa Zsa Gabor's 10th husband. On the honeymoon night. I think I know what to do, but I'm not sure I can make it interesting. You are in Spain. You are watching the young bulls being tested for the fight arena. Each bull is brought into the ring and allowed to attack a picador who pricks him with a lance. The bravery and courage of each bull is then rated based on the number of times it continues to charge forward in spite of the sting of the blade. Fellow Toastmasters guests, and anybody who has survived setbacks. Each day, you and I are tested by life in the same manner as those young bulls. If we persist, if we continue to charge forward, we too will succeed in spite of the sting of the blade. Easier said than done. When I was a sophomore in college, I flunked economics. Now, you might not think that's so bad, but I was a business major. But I persisted. I charged forward. Actually, I was escorted over to the counseling center, where a battery of tests determined that I had no interest in business, none. And so the following semester, I found myself in a speech and debate class, and I got a D. But I figured it's got to be the professor. What does the professor know anyway? Well, then I found out that the professor wrote the book that we were using for the class. And he also wrote across the country. It was used in campuses all over the country. The Sting of the Blade. Obviously, Dr. Freely knew his stuff, and he gave me, the new speech major, a D. The Sting of the Blade. But I charged forward, and 8.5 years later, I graduated. In the 1/3 of the class that made the upper 2/3 possible. But I was 26 years old, and for the first time in my life, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a speech teacher. So I went to graduate school at Kent State. I applied for admission. I remember walking into Dr. Heisey's office. He was looking at my abysmal record. Mr. Briner, you're a C student. We don't think you can cut it here with these grades. The sting of a blade. But I charged forward and I said, well, what do I have to do to prove myself? He says, well, you take 4 graduate courses, get 4 A's, resubmit your application. Well, I took 2 courses, got 2 A's, resubmitted my application, and I was accepted on probation into graduate school. Sounds like prison, doesn't it? And for the next 18 months, I marched through that graduate program, getting my A's and my B's, mostly B's. I wrote my master's thesis, and 2 weeks later, I got a teaching job, Baker University, Baldwin City, Kansas. Hooah! Yes! I had arrived, my dream job. Wow. 6 months later, I was sitting in a Baldwin City Rotary Club. They needed a speaker at the next meeting. I raised my hand, I said, I can do that. I'm a professor. And I'm a Toastmaster. And so 2 weeks later at the Baldwin City Rotary Club, I gave a speech that offended every person in the room. The mayor, the barber, the doctor, the dog catcher, they were all offended. And I was fired from my teaching job. The sting of the blade. But this one really hurt. This was my dream job. Have you ever made a mistake that had devastating consequences. I mean, the speech teacher who fails to analyze his audience. Whew. I charged forward. I went back to Kent State, got my PhD, went off to teach 3 years, wrote my dissertation. 6 years after I started, I was Dr. Briner. 5 years later, I'm in a Boston hotel, major hotel, the site of the Speech Communication Association annual convention, very prestigious organization. I was a member. I looked across the lobby. I saw a familiar face. It was Austin J. Freely, the guy who wrote the book, the dude who gave me the D. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. We didn't know what was going on. I walked up to him. Excuse me, Dr. Freely, you might not remember me, but I was a speech major at John Carroll. I was in your debate class, and you gave me a D, and I deserved it. He chuckled. He started to shake my hand. He looked at my name tag. It said, Rich Briner, PhD, professor in communication. His eyes lit up. His face was full of delight. He started pumping my hand hard. And he said, well, Dr. Briner, this is a surprise. Friends, it is no surprise. We are tested by life in the same manner as those young bulls. If we persist, if we continue to charge forward, we too can succeed in spite of the sting of the blade. And so, I ask you, the next time you feel the sting of the blade, what will you do? Madam Toastmaster.